At a certain stage in your life, it's not about just having fun or making money or learning stuff. It's about how you want to really give back. And it sounds like you have an inbound philosophy of helping not sell. And that is the biggest impact that HubSpot has made in the 14 years, right? I can remember meetings where Dharmesh and Brian and everybody would sit around a table like this size. And we'd be like, all right, do we want to help everybody or do we want to just help our customers?
On today's 100th episode of Rise, Grind, Repeat, we talk to Dan from HubSpot. We talk about the 5 things that you need to do in order to scale your business. Let's dive right in. Cool. Dan, thank you so much for joining on another episode of Rise, Grind, Repeat. I'm excited for this. HubSpot has been in my life for quite a while, being in the digital marketing world, and to know that you're one of the first salespeople ever hired there, that's crazy.
Oh, I agree. It's first of all, we were just talking about this. I'm the luckiest guy in the world, right? When I tell you the story of how I started with HubSpot, it's incredibly amazing. But over the last 14 years, even more impactful, right? Because when I started with HubSpot, there were 6 people, right? It was Brian Halligan and Dharmesh, Mike Volpe, Mark Roberts, Colleen Coyne, and that was it, right? And in my entrepreneurial career, my 4th startup, right, my boss was this guy, Brian Halligan, right? And when he started HubSpot, he called me. He called me and he's like, we're starting this company in Boston and we'd like you to join. I'm like, all right, well, I'm a little busy now, and you're in Boston. And this is 2006, and he's like, but like you're a pretty good sales guy. You're a pretty good startup guy, so we want you to like join us. And I'm like, all right. So I went to Boston. I interviewed with Dharmesh, with awesome guys, right? Unbelievable. And my boss at the time was Mark Roberts. He was the VP of sales, right? Just graduated from MIT. The first 10 employees of HubSpot, all graduates from the Sloan School of Management, MBA school, except me, right? And I'm like, oh my goodness, these guys are the smartest people I ever met. And they were incredibly smart. And I was working with Mark, and he was the kindest, nicest guy, right? The first chief revenue officer, vice president of sales of HubSpot. And he's on the phone, and he's talking to a guy. And he's like, oh yeah. Just nodding, like really chill, really cool. And he's like, oh yeah. Yep. 250. Yep. Oh yeah, I could take your credit card right now. And he took the digits right on the phone. And as a like 30-year salesperson, I'm like, what just happened? Oh my goodness. Did he just have a conversation on the phone and get a credit card? And in fact, that's what he did. I'm like, I need that skill, right? So I signed up, and then over the last 15 years, oh my goodness.
Yeah, HubSpot has exploded.
Incredible, right? To now HubSpot sold in 120 countries, right? 4,200 employees, right? 5 different software products. The leader in inbound, the #1 CRM for scaling companies. Like socially responsible. 2 things about HubSpot that are just amazing. #1, we just announced a new product called Ops Hub, right? Operations Hub, which is super exciting. It's our 5th hub, and it starts at free. Right? And one of the things that we've learned along the way is this freemium model where you give stuff. Do you like free stuff, Dustin?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
why? Why do you like free stuff?
I get some value and don't have to exchange anything. I don't have to exchange any monetary value for whatever that is.
People love free stuff. Actually, we've done all the research. There's a variety of reasons why people like free stuff. Right? 1 is because it's a little less risk. #2, you get value almost immediately. #3, there's ability for you to try it out just a little bit. But the #1 reason most people like free stuff is because you think Colton's paying for it. And then you're not paying for it. And you're like, ooh, I'm getting a deal. And you feel like you're special, right? And so this like freemium model, this Ops Hub, our 5th hub that was released, starts at free. Right? Helps you sync your data between systems and HubSpot. And then on Earth Day, HubSpot announced that we're carbon neutral today. right? Not,
wow.
you know, sometimes
Yeah,
you see
20,
these big
45, 50,
exactly,
60.
right? And how do you feel when you see that, right? You're like, okay, they're like moving in the right direction. You can't really like give them a hard time because at least they're aware that they're horrible people and they're destroying the environment. But my buddy Whitney Swanson, oh my goodness, he puts out this press release and he's like, no, today. I'm like, what do you mean today? He's like, we've reduced to zero our carbon footprint since 2006, right? And moving forward, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
Just always thinking ahead.
I know. And it's been an unbelievable journey. My background as an entrepreneur, I've done 5 startups in the last 42 years. I'm a little bit quirky, which you already know, because we're doing this live, right?
Yep.
You're like, Tyre, do you want to like come down to Tempe and mix it up as like human beings? And I'm like, I don't know, Dustin. Are we ready for that?
What that's like.
I know. This is the first time I've had pants on in like 14 months, right? And I'm like, ooh, it's like I've had 2 vaccinations, right? I think I'm ready to go, right? These guys are responsible. All right, let's try it. And so this is the first day that I've been out and about. I went to the airport, dropped my son off. I went to Galvanize, Galvanize down in,
I love that place.
Yeah, and did a little work there and took 2 meetings and then drove over here. And so it feels great to get out in in front of actual human beings, right? And interact as a social person. But I saw about my background, 42 years. I worked my way through college, selling books door to door in the 1980s when I went to Colgate University. I was a bass player in a heavy metal rock and roll band, right? I had long hair. It was awesome. So I don't know, any bass players in your life?
I don't think so.
Bass playing is a very good foundation for a business career, because if you're like a lead singer or a guitar player, you always want the spotlight. It's all ego.
Makes sense.
Bass players don't give a shit about that. What bass players care about is they want the foundation of the band, the foundation of the music, right? And they're just in it for like the creating the sound, right? And all the bands that I played all through college, and I was a professional musician for a year after I graduated. That was like the key to business, of working with other people on their vision and mission to try to make something that's meaningful. Anyway, my first startup. When I got out of college, I joined this company called the Computer Store. And you've never heard of them because they're out of business. But it could have been the worst run business in the history of America.
Sure, you learned a lot.
It was incredible. That's the philosophy I took. I got hired by this company. They had an exclusive to sell Apple hardware, Apple computers, east of the Mississippi. Right? And exclusive. No one else could sell it. They were the only people. They somehow found a way to screw that up. It was amazing. Right? And I worked there for a year, and my boss, this guy, Roger, he comes in one morning and says, I've got some news. I'm like, all right, what is? He goes, I'm leaving. And I'm like, where are you going? He's gone, I'm going to a startup. I'm like, what's a startup? He's like, it's a small business that's going to grow very quickly. I'm like, all right, good luck. He's like, oh, no. I want to take you with me. I'm like, I got a job. He goes, I'll pay you $1,500 more a year. I'm like, yeah,
sold.
I know. It was cool. We didn't even call them startups back then. It's amazing, right? You guys in Startup Nation, like everybody has a side hustle. Everybody started. It was amazing. And this company went from $3 million when I joined in 1982 to $1.4 billion in 9 years. And I started as a sales guy. Like I was just a sales guy. And I worked in Boston. I worked in Framingham. I worked in LA. I worked in San Francisco. My last responsibility was in New York City, where I ran an organization about 300 people and was responsible for 30% of the profits of the company. And it was amazing, right? It was amazing. It was not my business model. It was Dave Norman and Enzo Trezzi. It was amazing introduction to fast growth. And I fell in love with it. I'm like, it's awesome. This is great, right? It's fast paced. It was very similar to rock and roll band, right? Everything was like all over the place all the time, right? You had to make split decisions. You had to think very, very quickly. And the business of buying computers in the 80s went from 40 points of margin, big fat margins, down to nothing, right? And so it was a real challenge. And then I quit and I started my own business, right? Which was an agency in Needham, Massachusetts. So the reason I'm here, not only because you asked me or Alyssa asked me, which was very smart on her behalf, but also there was collaboration software that was brand new called Lotus Notes. You ever hear of Lotus Notes?
Yes.
Okay, at one point in time, there were 100 million people who used it. And I was in New York working for a San Jose-based company, and I had a hard time collaborating. So I thought maybe there's other people in the world who need collaboration software. So I started this agency around Lotus Notes, and over the next 9 years, I grew it to $30 million company, about 260 employees, 6 locations across North. And you run an agency, so you know that's a big agency.
Yeah.
And once again, just luck. Just total luck. I just timed it perfectly. Just dumb luck, right? It's just like in that process, people had to move to a certain type of either collaboration technology or they had to upgrade their email. Yeah. Right. So everybody was making decisions on either Lotus Notes or Microsoft Outlook. And so we were able to scale, start and sell software products. And then in 1997, right, Phoenix-based company is like, okay, we should combine the two companies. And it was a good decision. So we merged the two companies. And I was telling you in the briefing meeting, you're like, but how did you get to Phoenix? And I lived in Boston at the time, and I'd been a big city guy, right, with Businessland and others. And they're like, no, we need you to come to Phoenix. And I'm like, I don't want to go to Phoenix. And they're like, no, this is where the corporate headquarters is. You're going to be the EVP of sales and marketing, and you got to like be on the board of directors. And back in those days, 1997, you really couldn't do it the way you like can do it today, right? There was no really virtual. Yeah. So they recruited me in December. And what's it like in Phoenix, Dustin, in Phoenix in December?
It is the most amazing state in the country.
Exactly.
I think it is the only reason why people move to it's the thing that'll get people to move to Arizona.
I know. And you come from like 2 feet of snow and you're there. And I'm like, wow, there's palm trees. Right? They're all dressed like you. Yep. Right? They all got like t-shirts on. I'm like, okay, maybe I could spend a year. And I've been here for 23 years. Right? And I love Arizona. And it's an awesome place to hang out. And it's a great business environment here. Right? We were talking about it, very business friendly. Sandra Watson, who runs the Arizona Commerce Association, unbelievable in the way that we've attracted both existing customers. We've got a great entrepreneur ecosystem. If you want more information, go to Greg's List. Do you know Greg's List?
It's funny. We've just stumbled on it, and it's amazing. I think I was introduced to it last week.
Okay, so Greg Head, right, who is the founder of Specialty Point and Scaling Point and Greg's List, right? About 5 years ago, when we were talking about supporting businesses here in Phoenix, we're like, we need a list. And I'm like, yeah, we need to like understand who's here and who's doing what. And I'm like, we should get together a spreadsheet. He's going, it's not a spreadsheet. Well, we need to have an app or something like and I'm like, all right, that's too hard for me. He's got, I'll do it. I'm like, oh, you'll do what? He's like, I'll create this like listing of all of the startup companies here in Phoenix. I'm like, you could do that? He's like, yeah, I'll do it. So he did it, right? And at the time there were, I don't know, the first time we did it, there were 143 companies. And over the last 5 years now, Greg's List is in 12 different cities across the United States. Greg Head, who is part of Phoenix Startup Week this week, stays at my guest house when he comes to Phoenix, right? He's just such the nicest guy. He's a good guest, too. He is a very good, he always leaves like bottles of wine when he leaves and stuff. And so it's so much fun. When he's here, I never see him, right? Because he's always in and out doing all the meetings and stuff like that. Now he lives in Dallas. He's got a very successful business scaling program that helps people realize their goals and dreams. And he's doing all this good for like Phoenix and all these other places all over the place. So very exciting. My third company went bankrupt, right? Which taught me business planning and humility. And it was horrible, right? I don't know if you've ever had to put a company into receivership.
No.
Okay. I'm telling you, it is horrible, right? You cannot sleep. You feel bad. And there was some extenuating circumstances, but I had to go into 12 locations across the United States and say, tell our employees, we have no money.
Tough.
I got to tell our landlord, I have no, you can have the furniture if you want, but I have no money. And it was amazing. How nice people were. They're like, okay, thank you for letting us know. And I'm like, okay, you're not going to yell at me. You're not going to like threaten me and sue me. And they're like, no, it happens. Actually, we're pretty, like, we appreciate you coming in and tell us. Most people wouldn't say anything and just stop the check. And I'm like, all right, well, you can take the furniture. They're like, no, take the furniture out. We don't want the furniture. But amazing. And over the last couple of, I'm going to say 20 years, I've helped a handful of companies move into bankruptcy, because when it's not your baby, it's a very valuable skill to do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
My fourth startup got bought out by Microsoft, right? And it's just amazing. I worked for Groove Networks for 4 or 5 years, and my boss was Brian Halligan. He went to MIT, met Dharmesh, and when they started HubSpot, they're like, okay, we want you to be the first salesperson for HubSpot. I'm like, really? That's amazing. And so I joined HubSpot, and 14 years later, amazing.
You guys built something amazing.
Big impact in the world. Right? Our mission statement is to help millions of businesses grow better, right? People as individuals, that's HubSpot Academy, which I do a lot of work for. HubSpot for Startups, which I do a lot of work for. Free software, which everybody loves free software. All of these ways to help as an individual, as a leader, as a manager, as a socially responsible citizen, as a business owner with technology. And it's the crowning jewel to a 42-year business career.
That's that is
an amazing story.
Yeah.
Incredible twists and turns along the way. Number one, I worked with Steve Jobs in one of my iterations, which
and how was that?
Amazing. Right? I think he hated my guts pretty much. Right? At one point in time, in my first startup, right, we had an exclusive to sell a computer by the name of the Next Computer. Mm-hmm. And have you ever heard of Next Computer?
I have not.
Okay, so anybody who knows, read the biography, knows that Steve got kicked out of Apple, right, because he was a visionary and wanted to kind of do his own thing. Yep. When he did that, he was a super smart guy, specifically around manufacturing, and he thought he could envision the future type of computer. So he created a company called the Next Computer. And Businessland was a reseller of computers. And we cut a deal, Dave Norman, the CEO, cut a deal to be the exclusive reseller of Next Computers, right? So I think we bought $100 million worth of inventory. So you couldn't get them anyplace else. And it was very, very interesting looking machine. It was not color, right? It was a big machine. It ran Berkeley Unix. There wasn't a lot of software available for it. And I ran New York at the time for this company, Businessland. And they're like, all right, Steve wants to come to New York and sell Next Computers with you. And I'm like, all right, well, let's go. And so we would go to the biggest companies in the world, right? And he's a tall guy, smelled a little funny, right? Very amazing salesperson, right? Very, very focused, right? And could answer objections. People would say, well, why doesn't it have color? And he would point at him and he'd say, you don't need color, right? The color that we can deliver today is not the level of color that really increases productivity. And I'm like, all right, well, you're Steve Jobs. You must know what you're talking about. And then at night, we would go to the Four Seasons, right? We'd get a banquet room of 30 of the luminaries of people in New York business. So these are people you'd see on Forbes or Fortune magazine. And it's amazing. My job was to enter, get everybody seated and then clap on my glass and say, ladies and gentlemen, Dave Norman, Steve Jobs, and then sit down. And all of these people like Gideon Gartner and John Gutfriend and John Reed, all these guys that you'd see in on all of these magazines, right? I'm sitting next to them, right? And I'm this 29-year-old kid going oh my goodness, what did I just It's amazing. And it was a tremendous learning, right, in the development of my business career, in credibility, understanding how to engage with other folks, and just a super cool chapter in my life.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, you've had so many different experiences, lots of ups, a few downs, but I think everyone needs to go through those downs in order to appreciate those ups.
Okay. I just did my presentation yesterday with Amelia Wilcox called Pivot and Grit. Right. And we spoke at Phoenix Startup Week, which is an amazing event. And we were talking about, I'm on the board of directors of her business called Zenovate. And Amelia, I love telling her story. It's amazing. She's the wife of a fireman in Utah. And they started an outdoor company selling outdoor supplies. And they went into a little bit of a tough time, and they had to sell their inventory, and it was hard. She told her husband, no, I'm going to start another company. He's like, no, we can't do that. He's like, she goes, yeah, I'm a massage therapist. I'm going to start another company. And he's like, all right, we've got my salary from the being a fireman, okay, this is pretty risky. So she started a company called Incorporate Massage, right? And are you a massage guy? Do you like somebody rubbing your back?
I mean, I don't get them often, but when I do, I love it. Yeah.
It turns out most people do, right? Some people are those kind of people like, never touch my back. But like people say, all right, you could cut my pay 30%. Do not like lose those massages. When that lady, they come in with these purple chairs and you lay on the chairs and that lady just sends you into orbit. Oh my, it's amazing. And you're like, oh my God, I feel so refreshed. It's so great. Anyway, over 9 years, she built a $6 million business, the number one corporate massage. We had these relationships with all of the big tech companies all over North America. We employed 1,200 part-time massage therapists, mainly women, right? These are not like Uber folks that are contracted, right? We paid in every single state.
Oh, really?
All of the licensing because they were part-time employees, right? And there were things that we could give them, benefits that we had to pay. That was the right thing to do. Amelia made all that decision, right? And we grew the company to $6 million. It was amazing. And then in February of 2020, right, we start seeing the information come in about a global pandemic. And I'm like, all right, Amelia, model, let's see if 30% of our business drops, then model 45% and 75% for, let's say, 90 days, right? And in March of 2020, 100% of our revenue just wiped out. Wiped out, right? You're an entrepreneur. If 100% of your revenue wiped out next week, what would you do?
I would get very aggressive on the sales front.
Ooh, I like that.
I would, figure out how to, I mean, obviously if you have to be there in person, how can we do this virtually? You have to pivot. You have to figure out, is this industry just dead, or is there a way that we can still provide value with our expertise? And then how do you position that? Just be on the phones and reaching out and is this
find something else to do. Okay, that's awesome. That is a great answer. Not everybody pivots to that. I thought you can put a fork in this business, right? There's no way. We spent 6 years. She's going to lose everything. Amelia thought exactly like you. She got on the phone. She started calling everybody. She's like, okay, we have these people, right? They're skilled in this. We can't go on and do like massage. What else can we do? Can we walk your dog? Can we deliver your food? Can we get you toilet paper? What can we do? Right? And she started hearing about the wellness of all these employees, right? She started hearing about, you know what we're really concerned about? No one's come out of their house for the last 90 days. And so she created this like concept of EAP, or Employee Assistance Program, which many people have. It's a health benefit that like lots of established companies have that didn't make a lot of sense because you buy it as a company, you give it to your employees, and then no one ever uses it, right? So it's like, but in 2020, everybody needs it, right? The global mental health is kind of
that's my biggest concern with all of this is the mental aspect of staying in Zoom, not having human interaction.
That's why I'm here, right? I want to like mix it up with you guys because like you're human beings, right? And it's much more fun and it's much more interesting, and as social beings we like crave that interaction. Anyway, she heard this enough. She's like, okay, we need to create better mental wellness, so we're going to create an app. She raised a little PPP money from the federal government. She got a loan, and she spent $250,000 building an app. And then she's like, okay, exactly what you said. We got to sell it. I'm like, well, knock yourself out. You don't know anything about EAPs. You don't know anything about really what the customers want. She goes, oh, yes, I do. And what I don't know, I'm going to know. And over the last 5 months, generated $300,000 of ARR. This woman worked 90 hours a week. Right. Wow. This woman worked herself into a little bit of a health scare almost because it was just her. There were 3 people in the company. We had to furlough all of these part-time employees because they couldn't go to work. And it was amazing. And like she would text me at 7 o'clock on Sunday morning. She's like, all right, I'm almost finished with that deck. Can you review it at 9 because I got an investor meeting at 10. We now have dozens of companies, customers, right? We've raised $1.5 million. The company is scaling very, very quickly, and it is amazing, right?
That is cool.
And it shows the hustle, right? That you guys understand, and successful companies understand all of the time, and super excited to be associated with Zenovate, that's the name of the new company, and helping mental wellness all over North America.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you both are good at identifying a need in the marketplace and how can we bring a solution, which, I mean, that's what all good businesses are, is bringing a solution to that need. Yeah. I mean, you've mentioned you've been lucky, but I think it's just whether it's having that good eye or a hunch, there's been something that you've been able to identify an opportunity, whether you saw it blatantly or just, I don't know, kind of felt it, but it sounds like you have a knack at, like I said, just identifying that a need is in the marketplace and you just figure out how to build troops around it and bring a solution.
Well, it all starts with your why, right? And Simon Sinek is famous for saying, all right, what do you want to do? My mantra is to do the most good for the universe. The reason I'm here is your friend Alicia. It's like, all right, is it Alicia or Alyssa? Alyssa. It's like, okay, we want you to come down to Tempe and be on your podcast. I'm like, all right. She goes, you'd help us out. I'm like, oh, those are the magic words, right? I want to do the most good that I can for the universe. Being a successful business person, being successfully associated with HubSpot, having written a book, The Inbound Organization, it's all about giving back, right? I run a mentor program. You can find out about it at dantyre.com. I work with dozens of companies that scale. I do office hours, either at Galvanize or the department or the Henry once a month, where I'll sit with entrepreneurs just like you. And I'll say, all right, where are you stuck? Right? And based on my background and experience, if I can identify, right, what is like holding somebody back, what the issue is, right? The areas, we sometimes call them inhibitors to growth. Right. And as an entrepreneur, you hit these things all the time. If there's somebody else who's been through it, who's seen the movie before, it's very, very valuable. And I try to make that myself available to that through my angel investments. Today, I have 25 companies that I've invested in here in the Valley and elsewhere. I work with an organization called SeedSpot. Do you know SeedSpot?
I do not.
Okay. Started here in Phoenix and has expanded across the United States. Socially responsible companies, right? So they have an incubator that helps scale companies that are trying to do good things for the universe. And I'm like, yeah, I'm all in for that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then here in Phoenix, we try to be the most empathetic and the best entrepreneurial ecosystem that we possibly can. We're never going to be San Francisco, but we can help people. We can reach down and help. And there's lots of ways that lots of experienced business people are like putting time, effort, and money to try to do that. And that's what I like spending my time on.
I love hearing it. It's, I mean, we've said it in here quite a bit. Sounds, I guess, cheesy or whatever, but it's, have someone that knows how to create content, run ads, and all that type of stuff. Our goal is that we can just help change family trees, and that's not just the businesses that we help. I mean, and it's not just from a financial perspective. It's maybe we provide enough whatever to have the resources to hire enough people so you can spend more time with your family or put your kid through college. But even more so, the businesses that we help, the consumers that they're reaching, they might have a product or service that would have never been found by this person. And by finding it, it makes their day-to-day better. That gives them the opportunity to do whatever it is that changes that family tree. So hearing you say that you just love the, do good. I love hearing that.
Do more good for the universe. I stole that from my son, right? Who is that kind of person. My daughter, Sally's very socially responsible as well. And my beautiful wife, Amy, who I've been married for 32 years. Actually, you should have her on the podcast. She's the smart tire. I'm all the big energy. She actually thinks things through, and she's helps young people transition, and has got an unbelievable knack for asking the right questions, and has a huge heart and is spiritual, and a yoga instructor and a life coach and all these kind of things. But that's the key, right? Is at a certain stage in your life, it's not about just having fun or making money or learning stuff. It's about how you want to really give back. And it sounds like you have an inbound philosophy of helping not sell. And that is the biggest impact that HubSpot has made in the 14 years, right? I can remember meetings where Dharmesh and Brian and everybody would sit around a table like this size. And we'd be like, all right, do we want to help everybody or do we want to just help our customers? Right? And I'm like, holy cow, that's an amazing question to ask. How can we do it? And we would say, okay, everything that Oracle will do, let's do the exact opposite, right? Because they're like a very good capitalistic company that reaches in and rips out your soul if you're an employee, and like it's all about the transaction if you're a customer, right? That doesn't seem like the kind of business that we want to be associated with, right? We really want to help people. And the foundation, and the reason I wrote the book Inbound Organization, by the way, you can go to inboundorganization.com. There's tons of free stuff there. My co-author, Todd Hockenberry, who is the best co-author in the history of books, right, has constructed this whole website with all these assessments and things you can download, and there's 24 podcasts. It's all about inbound. When we first started, it was about inbound marketing.
Yep.
Right? It was about what you guys do, which is you can help customers trick out their website, right, so they can get leads, right?
Yep.
Right? And that's like the way it's done in 2021. When I talk to all these startup companies, I'm like, all right, well, where are you going to get your customers from? And especially the technical guys, they're like, oh, that's a good question. I'm like, okay, well, you got to kind of think that through. They're like, no, the product is going to be very good. I'm like, I got that. Where are you going to get your customers from? And there's only one way to do it. Either proactively go after it or have your customers find you. Yeah. Right? And the whole inbound philosophy at the very beginning, 2007, was check out your website. Make sure that people find you when they're doing Google search and social media. Although in 2007, there was no social media, so that developed along the way. And then be of service, right? Have something people can download of interest, right? That would help them, exactly what you were saying in regard to your families, your family tree, helping. And guess what, right? A global pandemic accelerated that. Right? Because we were just talking about the legacy or traditional businesses. There's lots of people that you get business by go bring them a donut and a cup of coffee, right? But not in 2020. And all of those industries, companies are now accelerating to really understand that it's critically important that they're digital first, right? It used to be, all right, we're going to be like human first and then we're going to have a digital presence. Yeah. Now it's got to be digital. It has to be. And I have all the data and the facts. One of the great things about working for HubSpot is we have all these data scientists, right? And if you go to HubSpot industry statistics, right? You just Google that, it'll pop right up. You'll see that we track 103 of our 1,000 of our customers, and we put their information in aggregate by region and size of company so that you can see how things are going up and down. Amazing. Isn't that great? Yeah. Right? First of all, it allows you to do the benchmarking of where you're coming. Number two, you could say, oh, the whole construction industry in APAC is a little bit down. Or, wow, look at the growth rate of professional services and healthcare. And all of that is very valuable when you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to scale. The inbound organization, everything I learned at HubSpot. I always joke and say, everything changed in 2007. Because first of all these founding members of HubSpot, they were all brilliant, right? They would just say stuff that I'd be like, okay, how did you figure that out? Right? They were all MIT guys. They would have little equations. And I'm a Colgate guy. I'm like, okay, there's no equation for going out and getting business like that. And Mark's like, yes, there is. And he's got a book, Mark Roberts. He's the entrepreneur in residence at Harvard Business School now, called Sales Acceleration Formula, right? And together we grew this organization. Today there's almost 1,000 HubSpot salespeople in 120 countries, right? The foundation and the basis is the same. And that is you start with it's humans first. Right. And you guys invite me down here and very welcoming and you get that, right? The humans first is important. Number two, it's helping, not selling. Now, this is a huge change, especially people who are cold calling, people who are that little pushy, right? How do you respond when you get a pushy salesperson sometimes?
If I get a call out of the blue that isn't scheduled.
Do you even pick up?
Yeah, I mean, very rarely because of all the spam calls. And then when I do, it's immediately, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do. And I don't have the time right now.
Yeah. So, but if we're helping, if I'm like, no, Dustin, I help a podcast spokesman who want big time guests. And I have some ways that I can help you attract Gary Vee, Brian Halligan, and Dharmesh Shah. What do you think? Does that sound like you?
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's a little bit of a crazy example, but you can always find ways to help. And that's the foundation of the relationship. That's why I'm here, right? You guys we need a little help. I was wondering if you guys would be interested in engaging. Number three, you always solve for the customer. And that's a hard one, right? The idea is customer's not always right, but you got to solve for the customer. You got to understand where they're coming from and provide the right information to the right person at the right time. That means you have to have, this is where a marketing agency like yours really comes in. Because if you're sending the same information to a prospect, I know, I'm like,
Yeah.
singing to the choir, right? But if you're sending the same information to your customers that you have as a prospect, and I ask that question all the time. I'm sitting with a CEO and I'm like, wait a second. When people come to your website, do the prospects see the same thing as a customer? And he's like, yeah, of course. What else are they going to say? I'm like, no. You need smart content. And they're like, what? I'm like, if somebody's coming from like New York City, they need to see a New York Giant or New York Jet. If they're coming from like Arizona, they need to see an Arizona Cardinal, right? They need different pictures. They need to see different information. They need to see, how about different language? Do you have anybody that's Spanish speaking? And they're like, yeah, we have Spanish speaking customers. I'm like, how come your website isn't in Spanish?
Google Translate.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And like,
that's how that works.
exactly. So you've got to solve for the customer. And that is harder as you scale.
Do you have any tips on how to do that? Because I think that's one that I think a lot of people struggle with. And it's, I mean, that's where the value of an agency or an outside perspective can come in, is ask those questions to get you thinking. But for a business owner, anyone that's starting out, is there a good approach to go about to get that information?
It's a perfect question. And there's a couple of things that we suggest when you're first starting out. The first is, number one, always have a plan. Right. And if you go to dantyre.com, you'll see a blog article to how to build a successful company in 2021. And the first thing that I make everybody do is answer these 10 questions. The first is like, why are you in business? I want people to understand their why. And it's always interesting. Sometimes people know exactly. Sometimes they're like, that's a good question. And I'm like, all right, well, you better know that because it's an 8-year journey, right? And it's going to be a long, hard slog. So you better know why you're leaning in and doing this. And then one of the, I think it's question number 7 is, do you have a 12-month forecast of exactly what you're going to generate in regard to revenue, how much it's going to cost you to deliver that, that's your expenses and gross profit, and how much profit or loss that you're going to make? And people will say sometimes, yeah, I got it. Here it is. Sometimes they'll say, no, I got to get that. Or we've started. And you always have to have a plan. Yep. Number 2, you have to have a niche, right? And in the old days, it's like, I don't know, 2018 is the old days. I feel like it'd be
right.
Exactly. You could be a generalist. You're like, no, I deal with that. Today, the riches are in the niches. Or if in Europe, if you want to go to the beaches, you got to work the niches, right? I know. It's funny if you're from the Nordic region. And like the more specific you can get, there are certain customers that you have, right, that you do great work for. Right? You know their rhythms. You know their vocabulary. You know their seasonality. You know what they demand. You know what success looks like. Right? And if you can just get a handful of those kind of companies, right? They don't have to be in the same location. One can be in Utah, one can be in California, one can be here in Arizona, one can be in New York City. Then you're going to naturally be better at performing the right results. And all of those is important to create your ideal customer profile. Anybody can just Google HubSpot ideal customer profile. There's a free guide to do that. And then you update your personas, right? And your persona is the fictional character of who you're selling to, right? You'd be agency Armand, right? You're a guy who is trying to scale your agency. You want to create good value for your customers. You want to have a good culture. And like that ideal customer profile should make it a little bit easier for you to go after really good fits. You can still be opportunistic. It's always a little bit of controversial. Well, people say, no, I'm better off. I can manage everybody.
Yeah.
Right? And you can, right? But you do so at your own risk.
Yep.
Right? Because in the old days, if I bought from you and it didn't work, I was screwed. Right? I'd call your boss and I'm like, no, Dustin said it. And your boss would call you and you'd be like, Dustin. And then nothing would happen. I'm like, today, what happens if you don't do good work?
Oh, negative reviews everywhere. And now anytime you search the name as you're doing, your research, you see all these bad reviews. It's, I'll go to the next place.
And what does that mean to your business?
Lights shut off after a while. I mean, it's not sustainable.
Exactly. The reason you are who you are is because you do good work and people will vouch for it. We call that at HubSpot the flywheel, right? And are you a car guy at all? Do you like cars?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What kind of car do you drive?
Right now, Honda Civic.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was a hand-me-down from my wife. We just had a newborn 5 months ago,
No
and
way.
so I had to get a new car for her, and I got that before that 95 Tacoma. I'm reinvesting in the business, not the wheels. So.
Nice. How many miles on your Civic?
105,000.
All right. You're like not even 40% there. Those things go to like 260,000 miles,
yeah.
right? I love it. Right. So a flywheel in the car is what drives the pistons, right? And there's two things in the flywheel. There's either force or friction. And it works kind of the same way in business. And one of the biggest changes over the last few years is the HubSpot flywheel. And the way we look at our business, right, is there are things you can do where people are attracted. They come to you. That's like helping them. That's like giving them free stuff. That's like being on their podcast. That's like giving them all of the free tools. HubSpot just bought a media company called The Hustle. Have you ever heard of The Hustle?
Yeah.
Okay. And you can sign up. Everybody listen to your podcast. Sign up for The Hustle. It's like unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's like reading the Wall Street Journal every single morning, right? I'm like, my productivity is dropped by 15 minutes every day because I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I want to read this. I got a whole Hustle review folder and I've only been watching it for like 60 days and I already got like, okay, I got to read that. All right, I got to read that. And then I'm hard time finding. But that kind of emotion where you're helping people, where they understand and appreciate the value of what you're providing is very good. And then the friction is what makes it hard to do business with you. And a couple of my favorite friction points is when you call somebody on the phone, right? And you go into a phone tree, right? Mm-hmm. When's the last time you've been in a phone tree?
I think it was just not that long ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And how did you feel when you got into a phone tree?
0.0000000.
I know. And you're a nice guy, right? Most people like throwing, oh my God. And can you imagine if you're a customer? Can you imagine if you're sending me a check every month or it's coming out and all of a sudden you just want to call, right? One of the things that HubSpot does have 5-star service and support. And you can get somebody from HubSpot support right in the app. You don't even have to pick up the phone, right?
That's amazing.
And now you're seeing more people emulate that because like, I forget who it was. Maybe it was my doc. My doc is like, okay, you don't have to wait on hold. Just put in your phone number. We'll call you back when we're available. And I'm like, that's like that's perfect. That's exactly what I want, right? And driven by like the convenience on our phones, driven on the fact that there's tons of competition now. I don't know if you know this fact. In the average 2014, the average company had 6 competitors. How many competitors do you think the average company has today? I'll buy you a breakfast sandwich if you get within 5.
28.
Okay, 44.
Holy cow.
Right. Yeah, I know. And I bet you this year it's going to be 66. It's Startup Nation, right?
Yep.
Every idea that I've ever heard, right? 5, 10 people are doing it, right? It's not the actual idea. It's the execution on the deal.
Yep.
And what we talked about earlier, you always need to get your first few customers. You need to like power it up. You got to make sure that you're reaching out and finding that ideal customer profile, finding that persona, reaching out of something with value, just like Amelia did at Zenovate, and finding your niche, right? And then the next step is that proving the concept. That not only is there something there, but there's something there that we can scale. And those kind of successful companies utilizing, the flywheel is all about the force and friction and putting your customers at the forefront. Because in the old days, I would like call you up. A salesperson would call you up. And how do you feel when an actual salesperson calls you?
It's never fun.
Yes. It's like, okay.
It's never at a convenient time of my day.
I know. And you don't want a salesperson telling you why I buy. He has a vested interest, right? You want somebody to who's been through your process, right? To sit down and say, oh, I know where you're at, right? When we went through the similar process, this is what we did. Right? Because that person doesn't have a vested interest. So today you put your customers in the forefront. The flywheel is always about putting your customer testimonials, your customer case studies, your customer journeys there so other people can learn from it. And the salesperson has to do something a little bit different. The salesperson has to say, okay, you're not a good fit. If you read this book, Inbound Organization, Hockenberry and Tyre, it's chapter 26 is my buddy David Winehouse. And somebody came to him with a credit card. Right, and said, we're ready to start a program. Mm-hmm. He said, all right, let's jump in. Let's figure it out. At the end of 30 minutes, he's like, you're not ready. And they're like, no, we have our credit card. He's like, I'm not going to take your credit card. And they like, what? We're ready to buy. right? He's like, it's not a good fit. You're not ready. It's not going to be turn out. I'm not going to sell it to you, right? And I don't know. Doesn't that seem? Isn't that like? Isn't the little hairs on the back of your neck? I'm like, ooh, I know that's the right thing to do. I don't know if I would be able to do that. Professor Winehouse did it. Right? It was the right thing to do. They tried something else. It was horrible. They tried a second thing. It was horrible. They came back 2 years later. They tracked him down. They're like, Professor Winehouse, you were right, right? We were not ready for that. You did the right thing. You have ultimate integrity. And so we tell that story all the time because that is the hardest thing to do in 2021 is, right, understand, right? This is part of your ideal customer profile. If you can't help somebody, right? Even if you need the business, even if you want to be opportunistic, right? That like way in which you're looking at that, like that customer relationship, you got to be very, very careful. Yeah. Right. And the way we do that is we start with the goals and work backwards. Right. So we engage all the time. You have your 12-month forecast. You're like, okay, let's do a reverse funnel analysis. People are like, what are that? And I'm like, well, how much net new business do you want to bring in? And they're like, $1 million. I'm like, okay. If you bring in $1 million new business in the rest of 2021, you'll be happy. And they're like, yeah, we would love that. I'm like, okay, you did fine. How many customers is that? And they'll be like, let's say it's 10 customers. I'm like, all right, how many are going to come from existing customers? And they're like, oh, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that. None of them, right? That's all net new business. Yeah. All right. We got to get a flywheel going because some of it can come from your good customers. They all have subsidiaries. They all have sister companies. They have other opportunities you can expand it to. And they're like, okay, very good point. But let's say you need 10 new customers, right, to walk through the door in the rest of 2021 that average about 100,000 that will generate $1 million. And they're like, okay. I'm like, how many proposals do you need to get to 10 new customers? And they're like, oh, that's a pretty good question. And I'm like, you need to understand the ratios. That is one of the most important things. And I know, you know, as an agency, it's all numbers, right? We need to understand that, let's say you have to have 25 proposals to get to 10 new customers. And then to get to 25 proposals the rest of the year, how many opportunities do you need? Right? Let's say 50 to get to 25 to get to 10. And to get to 50 opportunities, how many conversations do you have to start? Let's say that's 100 or 150. And then how many leads do you need through your website to get to 150 conversations, 50 opportunities, 25 proposals, 10 customers? And then under what time frame? Understanding those ratios will help you understand the force and friction of your flywheel so that you can execute a little bit more effectively, right? Putting in the human element. The one thing that I suggest to a lot of folks, make sure you have a bot on your website, right? There's certain times I want to talk to a human being. Yep. There are certain times I do not want to talk to a human being, right? You guys did an excellent job here because we booked this, 60 days ago, right? You SMS'd me yesterday. You're like, no, I think it was Sunday. You're like, don't forget. I'm like, ooh, that's this week. Very, very good. Then yesterday, you're like, okay, any issues, you text me, right? All the information was right there. I didn't have to do anything, right? And that's all automated, right?
Yeah.
And you could do that for your customers, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that was the light. I'm like, oh, my goodness, right? I'm like, I'm going to meet this. It has your name in it, Dustin Trout. I'm like, yeah, okay, all the things I need. It had the reminders of what we're going to talk about, right? And it just became very, very easy for me to show up, to do good work, to meet with you. And that is reducing the friction. And that's so valuable as companies are scaling, right? If I was a customer, right, I'd be delighted. And then you do a little video and you'd be like, all right, Dan, why are you delighted? I'm like, I didn't have to think, right? Boom, I knew exactly what was going on. You guys anticipated what I needed. That is amazing. Right? Because as a speaker, sometimes you'll show up at the wrong place and they're like, oh, yeah, we moved it. And I'm like, I know.
Communication is everything.
Or like, Tyre, can you move like 90 minutes? I'm like, no, right? I'm scheduled in 15 minutes. I can't do any of that stuff. My life is like booked in 15.
Scheduled 2 weeks out.
Exactly. But you guys anticipated that. You sent that to me. And that shows that you care about me, right? I feel great about it. It's a delightful story of you understanding how to use technology to make it easier for me. And then boom, we're here and having a good time.
No, I appreciate that. And I think that's where, I mean, you talk about the digital transformation and it's been sped up with COVID, obviously. And I think that's the biggest thing is now that there's more adaptation, consumers are using it, like the self-scheduling to go pick up your Fry's grocery. My mom never would have ever downloaded an app, the Fry's app, let alone picked everything out, scheduled time. And she goes, I don't think I'm ever going to shop any other way. I don't have to take time out of my day to go do it. I can schedule it. And I think that's where all these digital tools are. That's where there's so much opportunity for startups and everything. Is you don't have to leverage $100,000 in overhead for personnel. There's a lot of tools and technology. HubSpot offers a ton of them. The scheduling, quite a bit to reduce that friction. If you can ever reduce friction, that conversion rate is going to go up quite a bit.
Starts at free, right?
Yeah.
It's very interesting because what people are realizing is that in 2021, every company is a tech company. You used to be able to say, no, I'm a nonprofit. We don't really do technology. Or no, I'm a construction company. We're not really. That doesn't work anymore. Because if I want to know whether you're going to be on site or whether you're working to get through the monsoon, right? I want to go on your website. I want to get on the bot. I want to ask that question. I want to answer in 20 seconds, right? Or I want to be connected to somebody who can answer it, right? And if you don't, there's 43 other people that I can go and ask that question to, and I guarantee you one of those has a bot on their website will answer it immediately. Or even better, we're going to send me an SMS push that says, no, we're not going on site today because of monsoons here in Arizona, and we will text you the next time we're at the customer site, right? Using that level of automation, right, that you can provide to your customers is transformational, right? It is like table stakes now for everybody. And I think people who are a little bit more experienced in business used to think of technology as like a nice to have. And in 2021, it is the core value of, it's the way that you get your people to your best work, that create your best culture, that gets you to be the most productive, generate the best leadership, right, and have the best customer experience.
Yep. No, I agree. I think there's a lot of pushback on automation, AI, and all that because it's going to replace jobs. But it's at the end of the day, I don't think it would be someone's most exciting time of their day to look at when you're supposed to come in and text you and say, hey, you're going to be coming in tomorrow. It creates a job, but is that what is fulfilling to them? We can automate that and then plug them into something that is fulfilling. Do you think that automation or AI is going to be a detriment to humanity, or do you think we're going to coexist essentially? Because I think that's the biggest scare, I guess.
It's a great question. It's a philosophical and a technical question. Historically, additional technology has not reduced the value of human interaction, right? You haven't talked to a travel agent in 10 years and you couldn't care less.
Travel.
You travel 10 times more than you ever could before because of the application of that technology towards your life, right? And so I don't see that changing. Artificial intelligence is a little bit different, right? Because when you get to the point where you get software writing software, real machine learning, right? It's going to accelerate the pace of all of the things that you just talked about. Yeah. Right. And that's going to have a profound effect both on the way we work, the way we live, as well as humanity. There's still a lot of stuff to come, but it'll all happen in the next 50 years, right? Healthcare, technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of these really big existential issues all come to the forefront in your generation, right? And I hope I'm around to view it because I think it's hugely exciting. I think it's incredibly interesting, right? The value of life today, both the life expectancy as well as mortality rate, as well as the quality of life is higher than it's ever been in the history of man, right? And there's no reason to think that as long as we keep it a little bit in perspective, that won't continue. So I'm not worried about displacing jobs, right? I'm interested to see if we are rational enough to understand how we can take all of these great tools, apply them, right, over the next 20, 25 years to live better lives and do more good in the universe.
Yeah, I think we're just going to live through almost another industrial revolution where it's like, once we figure that out, it's not like less people worked. It's just now more jobs were created, more businesses were created because of the efficiency and production. I think we're going to experience the same thing. There's going to be a lot of jobs that are lost, but I think net, there's going to be more jobs created because we're going to figure out how to use these tools and applications to better lives. And I'm just not the doom and gloom.
That's the way it's
type.
always gone historically, right?
Yeah.
So you have history on your side, and every like incremental stage, somebody's been like, "No, we can't move to cars, right? What's going to all the horses and blacksmiths?" And that's just old line thing. The real thing that's going to be amazing, though, is the pace in which you're going to see the installation of this new technology. Because when software writes software, right, then it's going to happen in weeks or days, or in certain instances, minutes, right? And that has profound implications for the pace in which we're implementing these new technologies. And that could have extraordinary implications. But it's going to be fun, right?
Yeah,
let's see what happens. We might blow ourselves up. We might end all of humanity. Who knows? Right? We got to be smart. We got to be aware. We got to be connected. We've got to be rational. We've got to understand the best way to engage to help everybody. But it sure will be interesting to see how it turns out.
Yep, I agree. And one more thing I want to touch on is you mentioned you work with a lot of businesses. You kind of see where that plateau is and help them through it. Is there any particular thing or tactic that's holding businesses back? I mean, there's a lot of entrepreneurs, small business owners, startups that listen to this, and I think if there is a commonality that you see, I think it'd be beneficial to kind of hear what that is and how you help.
All right, so I've spoken on this a lot, right? Done a lot of startup grinds and talked about my entrepreneur experience, my board experience, my advisory experience. And the reason why many companies flatline is because companies go through these different stages, right? And to go from $0 to $1 million, it's all you, right? Dustin, if you don't do it, if you don't work every single day, right, as hard as you can, it's hard to get there. Sometimes you just hit it perfectly, but usually to get from $0 to $1 million, there's a certain playbook. Right? What happens is to go from $1 million to $2 million, you have to do completely opposite things. The things that got you to $1 million work against you to get you to $2 million. And people who haven't seen the movie before, that don't know about that, they're like, but wait a second, I got to $1 million doing this. And you're like, great. If you keep doing that, you'll stay at $1 million. That's why companies flatline. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, there's a whole different play. They're like, how do you know that? I'm like, I've done it 45 times before. You got to change. And then when you hit 5 million, same thing. You got to do it differently. You got to lean into processes. You got to have managers. You got to understand the implication, right? Then from 5 to 10, and then 10 to 20, and then 20 to 50, and then 50 to 100. And the benefit of working in companies that have gone from $0 to $1 billion of ARR.
You've seen it all.
I know, and actually done it. It's not like I was just sitting there like not doing it. I was like in the mud, in the slime, watching all of the information, seeing how it rolled out, understanding how it worked. And everything that I did before 2007 is all different, right? It's all like wrong. It's the old way of doing it, right? And then everything reset again in, 2014. Then everything reset in 2018. Now everything is resetting, just what you said. 2020 is like this huge tsunami of change, right? Everybody has to change. I spend a lot of my time saying, all right, well, they're like, what questions do you have about HubSpot or inbound? And they're, well, it's risky. I'm like, compared to what? And they're like, well, what if we work like invest in it, it doesn't work? I'm like, what if you don't invest in it and everybody else? Exactly. I go, the big risk isn't you like trying it and it doesn't work, right? That happens periodically. But the big risk is you try to convince yourself that this is not a like theme that's essential to the scale of your business, right? You wake up one morning and it's already happened, right? People will be like, oh my goodness. Come here, Tyre. I'm like, what? They're like, you told me in 2017 it was going to stop. It stopped. I'm like, okay, well, I'm sorry to be the harbinger of bad news, but you should have started in 2017 when we told you, because it's not like a light switch. Now it's going to be more expensive and harder, right, for you to kind of scale. I try to say that with like love in our heart and understand different people, because the inbound revolution gone for the next 30 years. Right? The way in which business is conducted is like there will be lots of people who won't really get it. All the things we talked about, helping, not selling, treating people like human beings, focusing on the customer. Final thing is looking at the data, being a technical company, all those kind of things. So people will not just naturally like be inclined to get it until, 2025, and that's perfectly okay. They won't be early adopters, but they'll still be able to take advantage of the process, and wish them the best of luck. And your agency and HubSpot stands ready and willing to help them whenever they're ready to go.
Awesome. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of people can find you. HubSpot, most people know about it, but I mean, if they want to work with you, whether it's HubSpot or inbound organization, I guess, how can people find you and get connected?
Yep, dtyre at HubSpot.com. You can go to dantyre.com is my speaker website, author website. They can go to inboundorganization.com, Dan Tyre at HubSpot. You can get me on LinkedIn. I am incredibly fortunate to be able to sit with you today, Dustin. My first day out.
I appreciate that. Right here in Tempe.
I know. You're my hometown man, guy, right here now. This amazing, right? And any way that we can help, people can always get a hold of me. I'm very, very accessible to the extent of my bandwidth. Sometimes I go into these segments where I'm like, okay, I can't do anything for 3 weeks, right? I'm like under deadline. I'm not going to do that. And I try to set the right expectation. But if I can be of service, people can find me. And if they can find me, then happy to try to help.
No, that'd be amazing. I mean, we'll have links in the show notes and everything. So,
nice.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. Like I said, it's super exciting to have someone on the ground floor of an organization that's been a huge part of my career at other agencies and here and everything. So I appreciate you taking the time, coming here and letting this be your first venture out into the wilderness.
I know. Well, thank you for being a great host. Thanks for preparing. Thanks for all of the great logistics, and good luck for the rest of 2021.
Thank you. You as well.